Imagine this. You're standing before an old, worn mirror, reflecting a familiar yet eerily unfamiliar silhouette. Your eyes trace every line, every angle of that face, but you can't find a connection. Why? Because deep within, there's a silent pain, an unnamed wound that has frozen into ice, imprisoning your true self. This is the pain of comparison, an invisible burden that countless men have silently carried, causing them to lose themselves in an endless race to prove their worth. Long ago, in a kingdom nestled among misty mountains and ancient forests, lived a young man named Kael. From his childhood, Kael lived under the enormous shadow of his older brother, Elias, a skilled warrior, a wise scholar, and the pride of their entire lineage. Elias possessed everything Kael lacked: bravery on the battlefield, sharp intellect in the library, and especially the unending admiration of their parents. Whenever Elias returned from battle, cheers echoed throughout the village, and songs praising his glorious victories rang out endlessly. Meanwhile, Kael, despite his own diligent training and tireless study, found his achievements constantly overshadowed, becoming a discordant low note in Elias's symphony of glory. Kael's father, a stern general, often looked at Kael with eyes full of expectation but also disappointment. "Look at Elias," he'd say, his voice deep but cutting into Kael's heart like a knife. "His strength, his wisdom, his decisiveness. You must follow your brother's example, Kael. One day you must surpass him." These words, instead of being a motivation, became invisible chains, binding Kael's soul to a never-ending race. Kael began to believe that his value only existed if he could equal or even surpass Elias. Every minor failure of Kael's was magnified, becoming proof of his inferiority compared to his perfect brother. Conversely, every success of Elias deepened the wound in Kael's heart, reminding him of a seemingly unbridgeable gap. Kael tried everything to prove himself. He buried himself in grueling sword training until exhaustion, immersed himself in books late into the night, just to hope that once, just once, his father would look at him with the same pride he reserved for Elias. He embarked on the most dangerous adventures, not out of a desire for discovery or inherent courage, but to achieve more glorious feats than Elias. But ironically, no matter what Kael accomplished, Elias was always there, an unshakable icon. Even when Kael saved an entire village from a devastating plague, the villagers still praised Elias's wisdom and strength for providing his brother with that medical knowledge, not Kael's courage. The praises for Kael always came with a comparison, a reminder of Elias's undeniable presence. Gradually, Kael became more reserved, his eyes always carrying a deep sadness. He avoided family gatherings, fearing inquisitive glances and unintentional comparisons. Kael began to hide his true emotions, especially his jealousy and accumulated disappointment. He built a strong wall around his heart, not allowing anyone to touch the pain of being compared, fearing that if he revealed it, he would be even more scorned and seen as weak. Elias, his great brother, also sensed Kael's distance, but he didn't understand why. He tried to reach out, tried to mend their relationship, but Kael always evaded him, hiding behind a facade of indifference and false pride. Elias's shadow, instead of just being an image, now became a part of Kael, an internal shadow that constantly tormented him. Every time he saw Elias, Kael saw a distorted version of himself, a version that always failed in the comparison game. Kael's life became an invisible battle, where he constantly had to fight against his brother's perfect image, and the only victory he craved was self-acceptance. Characters like Kael often carry a deep emotional wound, hidden beneath a veneer of silence and relentless effort. They are individuals caught in a cycle of ego projection, where external expectations and ideals, especially from loved ones, are imposed upon them, creating a perfect image they strive to attain. The pain of comparison stems not only from objective shortcomings but also from the loss of intrinsic self-worth, as every achievement is measured against an external standard. Kael was not seen for who he was, but for how much he resembled or differed from Elias. This is a form of insidious psychological trauma, eroding self-esteem and the ability to express one's authentic self. So you, listening to this story, do you see Kael's reflection somewhere in your life? Have you ever felt compelled to chase an invisible standard, created by others or even by yourself? Have you ever imprisoned your true emotions just to maintain a strong or perfect image in the eyes of others? Remember, true strength lies not in surpassing someone else, but in surpassing yourself. Don't let frozen memories from the past, unintentional or intentional comparisons, define who you are. Begin your own journey of individuation, where you learn to listen to your inner voice, accept your flaws, and celebrate your unique qualities. You don't have to be a copy of anyone else to be valuable. Instead, courageously engage in shadow work, confronting the fears, jealousies, or insecurities you've hidden away. Only by accepting and integrating these darker parts can you truly be free and shine. Release yourself from the burden of comparison and allow your heart to melt, embracing the light of self-acceptance. Do you know how many men, despite appearing strong and resilient on the outside, carry an unspoken loneliness within, a lack of understanding and acceptance from the very women they love? This pain, often more subtle than direct comparisons, is a burden they silently endure, an invisible weight they must carry alone, difficult to share with others. In a modern city sparkling with lights and bustling with people, lived a talented young architect named Hui. He had an enviable career with major projects and prestigious awards. People looked at Hui with admiration, seeing him as a symbol of success and self-reliance. However, behind that perfect facade was a deep abyss of constantly gnawing wounds. From a young age, Hui witnessed his parents' unhappy marriage. His father, an authoritarian and ill-tempered man, often vented his anger on his mother with harsh words. His mother, a gentle but weak woman, quietly endured. That scene left a deep scar in Hui's mind, making him believe that men must always be strong, always hide their emotions to protect those they love, and that weakness would lead to harm for both himself and others. As he grew up, Hui fell in love with Lan, a beautiful, intelligent, and independent woman. Their love was initially passionate and fairy tale-like, but the more they grew together, the more Hui recognized Lan's unspoken expectations. Lan was a modern, strong woman who admired Hui's resilience and problem-solving abilities. She often said, "You're so strong, so rational. I've never seen you weak or complaining about anything." These compliments, though seemingly positive, inadvertently became chains binding Hui. He felt he constantly had to maintain the image of a perfect man, without any flaws or weaknesses in Lan's eyes. He didn't dare share his work pressures, his worries about the future, or his personal insecurities. Whenever he tried to reveal a little about his negative emotions, Lan often reacted with confusion or even slight discomfort. She didn't understand why a perfect man like Hui could have such feelings, which made her lose trust in the image she had built of him. One time, Hui faced a challenging major project. He had to deal with enormous pressure from partners, design dead ends, and even skepticism from his own team. All day, he buried himself in work, heavy thoughts weighing him down. At night, he wanted to find comfort, a shared moment with Lan. He began to talk about the difficulties he was facing, but Lan quickly interrupted him. "Don't worry too much, you're always strong. I'm sure you'll solve everything. You're a man, you can't be weak." She meant no harm, but her words felt like an invisible knife stabbing Hui's heart. He felt his loneliness multiply, as if no one truly understood the burden he was carrying. He slammed the door shut on his emotions once more, deciding to face everything alone. Hui started spending more time at work, trying to use busyness to mask his unresolved emotions. He became quieter, shared less, and gradually, his relationship with Lan became superficial, lacking deep connection. Lan felt Hui growing distant, She didn't understand why. She thought he was tired of her, or perhaps he had changed. She didn't know that her unintentional words, her expectations of a man who was never weak, had pushed Hui into a lonely corner where he had to silently endure everything. That pain became a part of him, a frozen memory he couldn't share, because he feared that if he revealed it, he would lose the respect and love of the woman he cherished. He carried the burden of unconscious masculinity, where norms of strength, rationality, and emotionlessness had deeply ingrained themselves in his soul, preventing him from living authentically. Men like Hui are victims of a deep-seated societal prejudice, where they are expected to always be strong, not allowed to show weakness or negative emotions. This is a form of dominant, unconscious masculinity, an outdated but still very common paradigm that shapes individuals trapped in a cage of negative stoicism. They are forced to suppress and endure pain alone because they believe it is a manifestation of strength, of true masculinity. But in reality, emotional self-imprisonment is a form of self-destruction, eroding self-worth and the ability to connect deeply with others. You, the woman listening to this story, have you ever unintentionally placed unreasonable expectations on your man? Have you ever expected them to always be resilient, never allowed to fall? Remember, true strength lies in mutual understanding and acceptance. Never underestimate the power of genuine listening. Create a safe space for your man, where he can express all his emotions, all his fears, without fear of judgment or being seen as weak. Ask him, "Are you okay? Is there anything you want to share with me?" And truly listen to the answer. Past psychological trauma or deeply ingrained societal prejudices can make it difficult for them to open up. But only with your patience and deep empathy can you help them begin the journey of healing these unspoken pains. Remember, weakness is not the absence of strength, but the courage to express your most authentic self. Encourage them to let go of the burden of perfection, and together, build a relationship based on authenticity and understanding. Has this ever happened to you? You see a man who seemingly has it all, a brilliant career, a dashing appearance, and an enviable relationship, but deep in their eyes, you sense an indescribable melancholy, an unnamed pain, difficult to share with anyone, endured alone for the happiness of others, a silent sacrifice? This is the final and perhaps most tragic aspect of the pain of comparison and a lack of understanding. In a time when material values and social status were more highly prized than ever, there was a successful young entrepreneur named Duk. He had built a strong business empire from scratch, and at 35, he had everything others dreamed of: a luxurious villa, expensive cars, and a powerful position in the business world. His wife, Tao, was a gentle, beautiful woman who was always proud of her husband's successes. She often shared stories of Duk's talent and brilliance with friends and colleagues. In everyone's eyes, Duk and Tao were a perfect couple, an admirable role model. However, few knew that behind that dazzling facade was a relentless inner battle for Duk. From a young age, Duk's family had high expectations of him. He was the eldest son in a family with a business tradition, and the pressure to succeed, to make the family proud, always weighed heavily on him. His father, a strict and taciturn man, rarely praised Duk, instead asking questions that delved into his results, into what he had achieved compared to others. Duk grew up believing that love and acceptance only came when he achieved great things, when he proved his worth through numbers and awards. When he married Tao, Duk tried even harder to maintain the image of a perfect husband, a solid pillar. He worked tirelessly, bearing all family responsibilities and never complaining. Some nights, he sat alone in his office, facing silent failures, huge losses he dared not tell his wife about. He feared that if Tao knew about those difficulties, she would be disappointed, would look at him differently. He believed that Tao's happiness, the family's peace, depended on his ability to maintain the image of an unbeatable man. He accepted enduring the pain alone for the happiness of others, a silent sacrifice that no one knew about. Gradually, Duk became a cold and distant man in his own home. He talked less with Tao, no longer sharing his deep feelings or thoughts. He believed that showing weakness would cause him to lose his status, lose his wife's respect. Tao, though she loved Duk, didn't understand what was happening inside him. She noticed the change but thought it was due to work pressure or that he was too busy. She didn't know that the man she admired was carrying a huge psychological burden, an unspoken pain he couldn't express, fearing it would shatter the perfect image he had meticulously built. He often felt exhausted but couldn't find a place to lean on, to release. He lived in a world of solitude, where he was the only one who saw the cracks hidden beneath the gilded surface of his life. Every time Tao said, "You're so capable, so strong," his heart ached. He knew it was a compliment, but also a reminder of the mask he wore, a mask that didn't allow him to be himself. Duke's tragedy lay not only in his inability to share, but also in his refusal to allow himself to be weak. He believed that maintaining happiness for others meant bearing all difficulties and pain alone. This is a distorted form of unconscious masculinity, where sacrifice is misinterpreted as emotional suppression. He had turned himself into a stoic statue, outwardly strong but hollow inside, because he had denied himself the right to feel and express. Men like Duk symbolize the tragedy of ego projection, where societal and personal expectations of success and strength are heavily placed upon them. They embrace the pain of comparison and expectation, choosing to endure the pain alone to maintain a perfect image in the eyes of others, especially those they love. This is a form of insidious psychological trauma, leading to a severe deficit in self-worth and the ability to form genuine emotional connections. They are often trapped in an extreme cycle of stoicism, believing that controlling all negative emotions is the path to strength. But in reality, it's the path to isolation and mental exhaustion. You, listening to these stories, it's time to free yourself from the burden of perfection and invisible expectations. Never be afraid to show your weaknesses or to let others see the cracks in your soul. True strength lies not in struggling to bear everything, but in the courage to accept imperfection and seek support. Begin your own journey of individuation, where you learn to listen to your inner voice, accept all aspects of yourself, including your fears and insecurities. Engage in shadow work to confront the darker parts of your soul, the suppressed pains. For women, understand that your man is also human, with fears, wounds, and desires for unconditional love and acceptance. Learn how to win hearts in your relationship, not just with words but with actions, by creating a safe space where he can be himself. Never place unrealistic expectations of strength on them. Encourage them to share, listen without judgment, and let them know you love them for who they are, not for what they achieve or the image they project. Let these frozen memories melt. Let go of the burden of needing external validation, and accept that your worth lies in your unique self. You deserve to be loved, understood, and to live an authentic life, unburdened by endless comparisons or expectations. Your inner strength is limitless, and only when you free yourself from these invisible chains can you truly be reborn, stronger and more at peace than ever before. The end.